Hi everyone, it's Saran, and today, as a part of the 17 books I'm reading, resourcing, and reviewing in 2017, I will be reviewing Homegoing by Yaa Gyasi. So, I just want to first start by saying that this is one of the best books that I've read in a really long time, and I'm excited to share with you all what I think you can get from it, but at the same time, try not to spoil it for you because you just definitely have to read it yourself. So I first heard about Homegoing from a friend who was just like, I'm reading this book, you should read it. And then I was looking up the author, who happens to be a 26-year-old black woman, and I found that she was on like talk shows, late night shows, and all of that. So she was getting some buzz around this book. So I went into it kind of anticipating that it was going to be really good, but I was in for a surprise because it was great. The setup of the book is kind of unique. It's in chapters, but the chapters aren't numbered. Instead, they go in chronological order by generations of people. So the book starts by explaining this story about two sisters, Essie and Afia, who are growing up in West Africa, Ghana specifically, during the mid to late 18th century. And the sisters, they part ways at birth. They have the same mother, but their stories are kind of unique. They're not growing up together. They're growing up separately. Afia stays in Cape Coast or West Africa, and Essie gets captured by slave traders and is taken to America, where she begins her family there. So it tells this parallel story of these two generations of people who are going through the motions both in America and in West Africa, all the way up to the end of the 20th century where the book ends. So each character has their own story that involves some type of influence with either where America was at the time, where Africa was at the time, and how race and age and gender and circumstance and tradition and discrimination and religion play a part in their upbringing and the way that their lives turn out. So I've never read a book like Homegoing before where the chapters were broken up by generation, by character. So that was the most interesting thing for me to read. I found myself kind of going back into the book like, wow, making that connection there, making that connection there. But Gyasi, the author, she does a very good job of stringing these stories together but still making everyone's story unique. And I think that was the most interesting thing about the book to me. It's like when you think about your story and you think about your mother's story and your mother's story, it's like you might know everything about their stories, you might know nothing at all, but we know just enough about generations, we know just enough about upbringing, we know just enough about time to know that our lives are different in that way, and that our stories are not the same as our mother's stories. So that was the most beautiful thing to me, to see how everyone's story was so different and that she was able to really distinctly say, this is going to be what your story is about, and I'm going to place you in this setting, and I'm going to make this unique about your life based on your personality or your circumstance. That was just great to see. The one thing that she kind of used to tie all the generations together was an heirloom, which was a necklace, a black stone, that was given to the sisters earlier on when they first were born back in West Africa, and how all of the generations passed down this heirloom as a way to signify some type of connection to their ancestors, to their elders, whether they knew them or not. I also loved at the end how the two lineages kind of came together, but not going to tell you too much more about that. But that was also really interesting, how they started together and they ended together, but it was like a, you know, it was a journey to get there. So there's 7 generations on each side from Afia and from Essie. There's 7 generations that go down to the end of the book. Like I said, the last generation ending in the late 20th century, excuse me. I found myself putting this book down only because I'm graduating college in like 3 weeks. I know. And I was just super busy. So this book actually took me longer to read than I wanted it to. But when I was reading it, I was just so engrossed in it completely. It is such a beautiful story. And I found that the thing that kind of kept me in it was just the drama of everyone's life, and the fact that no two characters out of the 14 characters that were highlighted in this book, no two characters had the same story. No two characters' stories even really closely resembled each other, which was also really powerful. How do you tell a story of a man whose mother gave him up as a slave because she had to return to the plantation, but how his life is something completely different than the life that his mother led? Or how do you tell the story of a son whose father was addicted to drugs, but now he is getting his doctorate in school? It's such a wonderful representation of life and what life can be, and how life is a perfect balance between structure and spontaneity, and some things you choose for yourself and some things are chosen for you. If I had to say why Homegoing is so profound and meaningful, I would say it's because it highlights something that is so prominent in African American culture, which is that a lot of us do not know where we come from. And we might have an idea of where we come from. Maybe we've been able to take a DNA test to see where we can trace our roots back to. I know that's something that's available to people now. Maybe we've have pictures or stories that are passed down, but you know, we don't have that ability to really feel in some ways tangibly connected to our ancestry, just because of the fact that we were brought from Africa to America, where tradition, language, culture, freedom was stripped from us so that we couldn't pass it on to future generations. So showing in this book how Ghana, which is where the story is started and where one lineage is sustained throughout the story, showing how that is such a representation of culture being preserved and being protected through time, and seeing how even that is some ways connected to the African American story here. She shows how they're both different and similar, how they're both unique in what they hold, how they're both unique in what they preserve, but they're so similar in what matters. They're so similar in the beauty. They're so similar in the struggles, and how connecting these two things is what makes us powerful, what makes us unique, what makes us as an African American or African people so special, because we are able to have these parallel and perpendicular lives that are so rich with struggles and triumphs and gold. The Gold Coast, literally the Gold Coast. We come from gold. I think the thing that I want readers or listeners or you to pull most from Homegoing, whether you read it or not, is the innate connection that we have to each other, and how our stories are so different and they're so similar, and we cannot separate ourselves from our brothers and sisters. We cannot separate ourselves from our history. We must be in tune with our history. We must be in tune with who we are. We must be willing to research home, at least if we can't go back. I had the privilege to go back to Ghana for a month when I was 19 years old, and it changed my life. And even though I couldn't say, oh, I have a family member who I know comes from here, or I know somebody who speaks this language, I was able to visit the slave dungeons in Cape Coast. I was able to stay at a homestay with a host mother who was willing to teach me about Ghanaian culture and kind of share with me the current experience of a Ghanaian. And even if you can't go back to Africa, even if you don't have that opportunity, be willing to research, be willing to be open to your history. Even if you feel disconnected from it, I challenge you, if you're not from Africa, if you're not from Ghana, if that's not a part of your lineage, Homegoing is still a wonderful representation of time, traveling through time, and being connected to your families, whether you know them or you don't know them. So yes, Homegoing by Yaa Gyasi. Definitely worth reading. You can find this book. I was able to rent it from my school libraries, but it is actually on the bestsellers list right now. So I'm sure you can find it on Amazon, at your local bookstore, or your local library if you want to save money to rent it out. Thank you for watching my book review. I will next be reviewing The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle, so stay tuned for that in the coming week. Bye.